Welcome to Resolve IBS and IBD Naturally. I'm Courtney Cowie, a nutrition therapy and functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. If you are struggling with the symptoms of IBS or IBD and want to get to the root cause of your symptoms so you can take back your health through a whole person approach, this podcast is for you. Just a disclaimer that the information I'm presenting in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice. You should always consult a qualified practitioner before making any changes to your health or medical regimen. That being said, let's get on with the show. All right, Jane Barlow Christensen, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to have you on today. I'm going to let you actually start by telling a little bit about kind of your background, what you do, and hopefully we can connect this to the gut health realm, specifically people struggling with things like IBS and IBD.
We definitely can connect it there.
Good.
I think that absolutely 100%. And I think it's hilarious that both you and I are like, how did we connect? And what are we
Right.
talking about today? Yeah,
Exactly.
no, it's absolute perfection. So I grew up in a big family. I'm second oldest of 14 kids, and my dad was a medicinal botanist. So I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and this was, during the hippie era, the fast foods and processed foods and all that stuff was just now, it was just starting to really come into all this stuff.
Yeah.
And, to make a kind of a long story short, I went into fitness when I was 18. I got married when I was 18. I fell in love with fitness. So I started teaching aerobics, we used to call it then. I became a personal trainer. I eventually built my own gym, and I've always been into fitness, nutrition, all the stuff. And then 27 years ago, my dad passed away, and he was very young. He was 2 years younger than I am right now.
Oh, wow.
So he was only 62, and his business died with him because he had all these herbal remedies and these herbal tinctures, and he mostly sold to practitioners because there was a pretty big learning curve with the things that he did. They were for serious health issues like IBS and cancer and heart disease and Crohn's and Lyme disease and all the things that normally are in the hands of a practitioner, whether it be a natural practitioner or a medical, the traditional medical doctor. My dad's formulas had a big learning curve, so his company kind of died with him.
Okay.
So about 23 years ago, so 4 years after my dad passed, I restarted his company. And I've not only carried on his work, but I have a whole line of my own formulations that I've done too. So I had this big 20-year career in fitness, which I still did for a long time. And I taught classes. I ended up teaching classes for 40 years. And now, I carry on my dad's work. I do my own stuff. And my goal really is just to empower people with information, healthy, natural lifestyle in a whole bunch of realms of whatever the people are interested in, and share wisdom and knowledge. I think we live in really crazy times, chaotic times, but here's the thing, the coolest time ever to be alive. That's what I think.
Yeah, right now for sure. Yeah,
Yes.
and I think just having such quick access to information everywhere, right? Like is to people's advantage because no longer is it that you have to outsource this to say like, well, you just use a doctor as an example, right? As like your health
Right.
expert, you really
Right.
have the ability to go investigate and start to question and figure out what might work better than say like taking a drug, right? Because I'm sure we can agree on that, Jane.
For sure. Well, and
Yeah.
here's the thing. I think with all of the information, this really ties into gut health because you have to use discernment.
Yes.
And part of discernment is tuning into your gut, into your
Yes.
intuition. And I do believe there's a huge underlying emotional, traumatic thing that comes with gut health,
Yeah.
because it's not just about the physical part. There's an emotional, I have my youngest sibling is a boy, and
Yeah.
he's now 40, almost 44, and
Okay.
he has suffered from Crohn's and irritable bowel syndrome
Yeah.
for most of his adult life. And so he's kind of been my little buddy test case as he's walked through life. And there's a huge piece of that is emotional and
Yeah.
listening to his gut.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure, for sure. I'm a huge fan of, or I should just say have a very keen interest in the whole mental, emotional, energetic side
yeah,
of gut stuff, right? And
yeah.
I'd love to maybe someday get deeply specialized in that, but for now I kind of stick with the physical mostly other than teaching clients stress management skills, but I would agree 100%. And I remember one of the more influential, I think it was a podcast episode I was listening to, and I can't remember who the naturopath who was talking, but he did a lot of work with people diagnosed with IBS and SIBO and IBD as well, and that's sort of where I've gravitated, and he was, like, many years ago saying, like, most of these people have, like, a trauma or an
Yeah,
unresolved emotional thing that
yeah.
needs to be fleshed out and processed for the physical health of the gut to be restored, right? And we probably are making it sound like it's a super straightforward thing as we're having this conversation, and my experience has been that it's not always straightforward because sometimes it's actually trying to figure out, well, what is it? Or is it many things, right? And trying to get to the root of that. But I would love to have you kind of talk a little bit about how herbs can be used, maybe even energetically, to help balance out how the body is working on a physical level. Because I'm imagining that you're trained in Western herbalism, right, Jane?
Yes, mostly
Yeah.
Western, and
Mostly Western.
mostly I do have some Ayurvedic medicine, some herbs from other countries that I love, but
Okay.
yes, my dad had a real love of Native American plants, especially.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah,
I only ask because I back in the day trained for a couple years in Chinese herbal medicine and decided that wasn't the path I ultimately wanted to go down. I
yeah.
super, super respected it though,
Oh,
and
for sure.
have a love for that whole way of looking at health, but I know that, like, herbalists just in general, there is kind of that common philosophy that although these herbs are basically like plant medicines that we can take in, like, there's also these really amazing energetic properties too, so
Yeah, well, and I think that people need to remember that not only has plant medicine been used by humans for millennia, it's
yeah,
only like the last 150 years
yeah,
where in the Western world, we've gotten away from that with all of our shiny modern drugs. We just kind of think, I mean, I think that's changing. I mean, these last 5 years have really proven to me that people have gotten wake up calls in
yeah,
all kinds of layers.
mhm,
But I also think that most people don't realize that the majority of the humans that are alive on this planet still turn to plant medicine first. The majority. We're so backward here in the West where we've got all of our modern stuff. It's like, and
yeah,
there's not only a deep wisdom to it, like think about the generations and generations of indigenous people and the medicine man. In fact, when I was 4, my mom was just getting ready to have her 5th baby. So my
wow,
the first 5 of us are like a year and a half apart. And
wow,
right before she gave birth to her 5th baby, my parents adopted a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 2-year-old Native American children, two little girls and a boy,
oh, wow,
and they were from the same family, and they are full-blooded Eastern Shoshone.
oh,
And so as we've all gotten older,
yeah,
all of them are in their 60s like me now, but
yeah,
they have all gravitated back toward their biological indigenous roots and embraced it. It's so beautiful to see because if you think about these layers of wisdom, I mean, I think most people can say, "Oh, grandma had this recipe, this stuff she put together and or my great aunt or my grandpa did this." Like there's something there. There's
yeah.
something really beautiful to that. And I think that if we start paying attention to that, it's gonna flow back at us, and our intuition is gonna kick in.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I have kind of a similar take on just like our food, right? Like how our
Mhm.
food supply has changed over time. It's like, we don't have to overcomplicate it. In a lot of ways, just if you could go back and imagine what your great great grandmother used to eat, like the food she would have identified as foods that were common at the grocery store, right? Like that's more the way we need to be going with a lot of this is. Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, that's foundational. For
Okay.
any illness or any disease or any problem that your body has, there's
Yeah.
always the foundation
Yeah.
of what you're putting in. Keep it as simple as possible.
Yes.
That, and so the food that we eat, you always hear, this is so common now, shop on the outside of your grocery store.
Right, right, right.
And that there's something to that, eat the rainbow. as
Right.
far as eat the different plants and simplify. You know,
Yes.
I think we need to simplify. It's a lot easier to eat healthy than people might realize.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. It's just taking the time to have a plan. I think that can be a piece of it right in today's world because it's very convenient to
Yeah.
stop and get something or quick heat food or whatever. But no, I agree. Like sometimes I'm always like, why are people making they're getting too in the weeds with some of these things. Like we just need to start with like the basics, right? Like let's just kind of get off some of the processed foods and eat some real food. So,
And let's just drink water and leave
right.
everything
Right.
else out for now. Let's just
Right.
start with that. Okay.
Exactly.
And the thing is, it can feel really complex
Yes.
because everyone's, keto and paleo and
Yes.
carnivore and
Yes.
raw and vegan and, all the stuff.
All
And
the things.
everyone's just like, so
Yeah.
I think, start with something simple. And especially with the things that you're dealing with, the people and the clients you have,
Yeah.
water and hydration, cut out the other drinks and then start putting in like healthy teas, you
Right.
know, and
Exactly.
that's a really great place to start.
Yeah, yeah. So, from an herbal standpoint, when you're working with people, do you tend to use kind of like actual like herbal tinctures, or do you actually start them as simple as sometimes just saying like, here's some just like bulk herbs, we can start you on some teas. Like, how do you kind of approach that, Jane?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see clients or patients, but
Okay.
I do have, I have a big group of doctors who purchase from me, and I
Yeah.
do spend a lot of time educating people. Like I have an online course and all kinds of different things. But the place to start, and I actually did a tiny bit of research just to divide out the IBS and the IBD, because
IBD, yeah.
yeah, my brother has suffered from IBS and
Yeah.
Crohn's for a super long time, and he's
Yeah.
actually doing really, really well right now. But I would say that there's some super simple things that you can do. And there is a difference when you're dealing with IBS and IBD. Because
Yeah.
as you know, this is something I really wasn't super familiar with. So I had to do a tiny bit of research on my own.
I
So
love it.
yeah,
Yeah.
so let me just put some easy stuff out there. So things like ginger and chamomile, and those are both easy to get in tea. I love fresh ginger though. It's really, really good for digestion and inflammation, and there's so many things about ginger that's delicious. In fact,
Yeah.
I have a really good, I call it an inflammation shot, but you
Yeah.
take fresh ginger root, fresh turmeric root, you peel them, you chop them up, you put them in a blender with some fresh orange juice and fresh lemon juice.
Okay.
I squeeze those fresh. You've got the two juices and the two roots. You
Yep.
blend it up and then you strain all the bulk out. And
Mhm.
it gives you this powerful inflammation shot that's not just good for inflammation in your joints, but amazing for your gut, your digestion, and it just wakes everything up. So ginger and turmeric are both really, really good for your gut and
Yeah.
IBS, as you probably
Yeah.
know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Slippery elm and marshmallow root both have a substance called mucilage, which helps to
Mhm.
coat the inside of the stomach and the
Mhm.
digestive tract. So it's
Mhm.
really, really soothing um, for the digestive tract. So
Mhm.
I don't know if you're probably familiar with those.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
They're actually in a lot of like what we would consider mucosal barrier support or
yeah.
leaky gut healing types of formulas, right?
Yep, yep, yep. So cat's claw
Yeah.
also
That's
is
a good
one of
one.
those ones. That's one actually that's a little more specific for IBD because
Yeah.
it's so healing. And if someone has like problems with their immune system, like an autoimmune, they should probably stay away from cat's claw. But
Okay.
other than that, cat's claw it's actually been studied and known as opener of the way because of what it does for your intestinal tract. In fact, this is one of the things that helped my brother so deeply is just getting cat's claw in tincture form because then it
Yeah.
can go in, nothing has to digest. It just goes right to the bloodstream, soaks in, right into the tissues of your body and really, really amazing.
Yeah, I've heard actually cat's claw can be used even for like tick-borne disease and kind of helping support the immune system for
Oh,
that.
100%.
Yeah,
100%. Oh,
yeah,
yeah. It's kind of crazy all the things that it's good for because it's high in antioxidants.
Yeah.
It's really good for things like cancer prevention,
Mhm.
um, arthritis, any type of itis, in joints or anywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, cat's claw is amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And what did you call it, Jane? Was it the opener of the way? Is that kind of
Yeah,
the
so there's a doctor named Dr. Brent Davis who studied it, and he coined the term cat's claw is the opener of the way because it balances intestinal flora, goes after inflammation. It's so good for your gut.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
love
known as opener of the way. Isn't that cool?
that is so cool. And what I like about kind of these simple ways of working with herbs, even for somebody who doesn't know a thing, right? There some of these things like ginger and turmeric, you can find these at a good grocery store, like a co-op, right? Especially if it's in season. But one of the principles I try to take, especially with my more complex clients, is if we're gonna work with like herbal products, because typically I'm doing like, say, supplements in a capsulated form, usually, sometimes it might be a tincture, is just keeping it super simple. Like, if
Yeah.
possible, like one or two things at a time, because sometimes these people can be quite sensitive and quite reactive. And, I've just found like the simpler the approach we take, the better that tends to pan out for like the really reactive people, where we're not throwing like 12 herbs in a complex formula all at the same time at them, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there's some time and a place for herbs blended, just because there is a synergy to different compounds that they bring.
Yeah.
But there's something really beautiful about not just single herbs, but small doses of single herbs.
Oh,
Almost almost in like a homeopathic way for some people.
interesting.
Yeah, and that is interesting because you'd think, well, I need to hit this hard with something really concentrated and a
Yeah,
high dose of it, but
yeah.
that doesn't always have to be the case.
Okay.
There can be really beautiful healing in the really simple things. So I love that you brought that up because it's so
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, so tell me
Yeah.
a little bit about that, like, that sort of smaller dosing, Jane, because I don't think I've ever heard an herbalist talk about that concept before. I mean, outside of homeopathy, I'm familiar with it there, but, like, tell me
Right.
when that would be useful, kind of.
Well, I think it can be useful in almost any situation. And this is where connecting with someone like you is really important because it can be overwhelming for someone who doesn't know about muscle testing or doesn't know about,
Right,
even applied kinesiology. These are all things that I think everyone should learn. We all have this intuitive sense,
right.
but sometimes I'll have people that'll get a hold of me. They'll find me through some whatever, and they'll say, "Hey, I need some guidance. I'm doing all these things, but I want to add some of your stuff." I've
Okay.
had people be on, I kid you not, 100 different supplements that
Oh,
they're
wow.
taking in one day. Not very many. Some are on like 20 or 30 or one
Yeah.
woman was on like 80,
Oh
80,
my
and
god.
and you just kind of go, okay, wait a minute.
That's insane.
Every People need to realize there's power in simplifying things and even
Yeah,
take it. This is where I like to take it. What are you putting in first, food wise, supplement
right.
wise?
Mhm.
And what can we stop putting in so much of? Sometimes people will benefit from fasting on
Yeah,
a super high level. You can heal so much if you go into fasting, especially if you've got some health issues and you're on some medications, you're going to need someone to monitor you. You're going to need to
right,
monitor
right.
your all your vitals and all your things. But I've seen people do long guided fasts and all of their issues heal. Now, there is a kicker to that. There needs to be the emotional piece needs to be looked at as well.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
can't just go, okay, we're going to heal the physical, and this is very important. But
Yeah,
what is the root cause? And especially with things that happen in your gut, there
mhm,
is a deep emotional root cause to
yeah,
gut ill health. It's the bottom line. But kind of back to your original question, um, the simpler we can keep it, the better. And I always suggest people, if you can get the benefit of, say, like cayenne pepper is
yeah,
really, really powerful for heart health, digestion, metabolism. It's a vasodilator, so it's really amazing for your vascular system. But
yeah,
if you can get that and go off of all these meds, cayenne pepper, one thing, will
right.
completely change your health around. So I think we overcomplicate it as modern humans, and we just don't need to do that.
Yeah, yeah. So this kind of brings up
Mm.
another interesting question that I'd be curious to get your thoughts on is, do you feel like if people achieve the health goal that they're going for, that herbs are something that they should be using as part of kind of lifelong health balancing and or preventative? Or do you see herbs as kind of more helping somebody who's on the path of like struggling with, say, a chronic issue or illness of some sort to get balanced? Does that question make sense, Jane?
100%. I think you need both.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we need to look at medicinal herbs like I said, cayenne, even
Yeah.
turmeric and ginger,
Yeah.
basil, rosemary. These are the things that we add to our food to help it taste better and add flavor. But what people might not realize is all the hardcore medicinal benefits. Rosemary is a powerful antimicrobial. So is garlic. So I think that on a daily preventative basis, there's a reason that these flavor our foods and make them taste good because
Right.
they're so good for us. And then the reason you would want to add medicinal herbals is as far as, say you have any type of health issue, that you might need, you might need cat's claw for a couple of years. You might need it for 6 months. You might
Right.
need it, there's things that I take, especially, the age I am and the knowledge that I have about herbs. There's things that I take preventatively every single day. Like I take cayenne every day. I take
Yeah.
turmeric every day. I take some herbs for my brain every day. Not because I have a problem, but
Yeah.
because I'm in full prevention mode the age that I'm at. So I think it could be both. And everyone is different. But I think everyone can start also, besides the whole water thing we talked about, people can start with cooking with fresh spices. Just
Yeah.
the spices that you love. And a lot of them are good for digestion. They have antioxidant benefits. There's so many benefits to just flavoring your food with fresh spices. The key word there is fresh. Fresh, fresh, fresh. If you have, spices in your spice cupboard that have been sitting there for years and they might flavor your food a little, but they're not going to give you any health benefits. So,
Yeah. Well, so
yeah.
what would be the shelf life in your opinion on, say, let's say you bought one at the grocery store. It's high quality, right? Let's say it was even like a spicely, organic, gluten-free. What
Okay.
what would you say like is the shelf life on, say, just the regular, just because I find this so curious, like people might not
Yeah.
realize this, right?
Oh, this is like so common. There's going to be, most people aren't going to like this answer. I'll
Yeah,
just tell you
yeah.
that.
That's
Oh,
okay.
yeah. So if you have a spice, a ground up spice that's in a little thing,
Yeah.
that you buy, if it's more than 6 months old, you shouldn't. But here's the thing. This is because what happens is once it's been ground up, it starts to oxidize and the properties go away. In fact, if you think about just something simple like pepper,
Yeah.
you notice how it's, these nice fancy restaurants or people now have peppercorns and they grind their pepper fresh.
Yeah.
Well, there's really good medicinal benefits to pepper that's better when it's ground fresh. Now it's going to still flavor your food if it's not ground fresh, but you want it to be ground fresh.
Yeah.
So the best way to do it is not only buy them in little teeny tiny, you can get them in little ones, but who knows how long they've been sitting in the warehouse or how
Yeah.
long they've been sitting back in the grocery store behind before they put them in on the shelf. And
Exactly.
this might feel really overwhelming for people. And this is where I say, get a basil plant from the grocery store and set it on in your kitchen windowsill or
Yeah.
whatever. Have a
Yeah.
rosemary plant. I live in Utah, so we have really cold winters. I have a rosemary plant. I wheel in the winter and I put it out in the summer. And I always have fresh rosemary.
Yeah.
So unless you belong to like a co-op or
Mm.
somewhere where they can, there's my neighborhood, which is, I have the coolest neighborhood. We have this little co-op and one woman organizes the whole thing and she'll buy like a pound of cayenne pepper, fresh,
Yeah.
it's rich as cayenne pepper. And we all take like a half a cup or half an ounce and we share.
Oh,
So
wow.
that is the very best way to do it. Now that can seem overwhelming for people, but just get them in small amounts and
Yeah.
rotate them when they're fresh, is what I say.
Yeah. Yeah, and that makes perfect sense to me, and I think those little, like, back porch, I don't know what to call them, like herbal potters, right? Where you could do, like,
Yeah,
some mint, you could do some rosemary, you could do some thyme, like, those are pretty easy to source, especially in the spring when all of the gardening stuff is coming out, like,
yeah,
I mean, even if you're only doing it, like, because I live in a cold climate, so, yeah, it would definitely have to come indoors if I was gonna do it year round for myself, but, like, even if you can only do it for 6 months of the year because of the weather, you're probably still gonna get more benefits that way than just
100%.
getting, like, the regular McCormick spice or whatever at the grocery store,
A
right?
100%. And you don't have to start with all of them. And
Right.
you don't have to throw everything out unless you've had stuff sitting in your cupboard for a decade.
Yeah,
Then
yeah.
you might want to start fresh with a couple things.
Yeah. Well, so this kinda actually brings up another really interesting question, which is, like, what are your thoughts about the herbal teas that you find in, like, say, the natural foods aisle at the grocery store that are supposed to be, for lack of a better word, like, medicinal grade, right? Like, do you really
Yeah,
think that those have properties? Because it's kind of the same concept, isn't it? Like, it's like these dried flowers or dried herbs or, stems or whatever that might have been in those tea bags for God knows how long, right?
yeah, yeah. That's a good question. I would just say maybe find a different source of tea rather than tea that. Besides that, you're paying a really high premium for tea that's get a little box. It has 12 bags in it.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not that the teas are bad. In fact, teas, if they're done right, they can actually have a fairly long shelf life and still be organic and all that. I have a
Okay.
place where I drink 2 or 3 cups of tea every single day.
Yeah.
Like I love yerba mate in the morning. I love pot arco tea.
That's a good one.
And yeah, that's a total, and then a holy basil. Those are
Okay.
usually my three go-tos.
Yeah.
And each for their own. In fact, holy basil would be really, really good for people who are struggling with irritable bowel or any type of bowel thing, because holy basil is an adaptogen that helps to lower
Yeah.
stress and balance body chemistry and bring homeostasis to your system. So holy basil is one of those that I would say definitely. It's super delicious, and it's actually really easy to grow. It's in the
Is
mint
it?
family, and
Okay.
I would say, unless you have a big piece of property or a big space, it can kind of take over. But
Oh, yeah.
holy basil is one of the funnest plants to grow. And that way you
Really?
have fresh holy basil tea. This is something I love to do, because then you can get the leaves, dry them, and then after they're dried, put them in some Ziploc bags, and then you have your own holy basil to drink all winter.
Yeah.
That's my favorite. But
Oh,
it's
wow.
actually easier to do than you think.
I
So
believe it. Yeah.
yeah.
Do you do it in, like, a dehydrator, or do you, like, just kinda, like, very lightly in the oven, or how do you dry the leaves out?
So I have these racks that I dry my herbs on. They're
Yeah.
just, my husband just made them. That he took these little wooden pieces and he put them together with some like chicken wire, but it's kind of fine. It's not like the big chicken wire. It's
Yeah.
really fine so that the plant won't fall through.
Okay.
You can definitely do them in a dehydrator, or you can just do them in the sun. You can just lay them out. But I like to have something where there's no moisture, like where there's something where they can breathe. So just
Yeah.
even get one little rack, and you'd be surprised how fast they dry. And
Okay.
I don't even wash them.
Oh,
Because there's really no need to. I mean, you can, but
yeah.
I don't wash the leaves of the things that I dry. And
Yeah.
it's really fun to make your own stuff. It's so empowering. You just kind of feel like, wow, I'm self-sufficient. And before we started recording, you were like, so were we talking about homesteading?
I don't re I
It
don't
but
remember what we're talking about.
it reminds me of that a little bit. Like, if you wanted to do a
Good.
little bit of homesteading, a little bit of a way to make yourself feel I'm I can sustain my life. I can be responsible
Yes.
for little things that I do.
Yeah.
It's really, really empowering. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that concept, and one of the things I'm thinking about as we're talking about this is, it's one of those additive ways for people, like, sometimes when I start working with a client, a lot of them in the beginning are generally eating closer to the standard American diet, and so we have to do this delicate balance of, okay, let's get the worst food triggers out. Some of them are going to be just straight up food sensitivities that most people with IBS and IBD have, but then part of it is just cleaning up the stuff that isn't the highest quality, but rather than looking at it as like, what can we take out? What's so awesome about this conversation, it's making me realize like sometimes for people, there's actually good in adding things in too in the very beginning and doing it in a way where, whether they're doing the holy basil for the adaptogenic effects and to help feel like their nervous system is a little bit more balanced, or they're doing it because like all of these herbs are rich in polyphenols, and who couldn't use more antioxidants in their diet, right? To combat the junk in the processed foods or whatever that we're eating, right? Or the chemicals we're getting exposed to. And I think that's a really nice way to do it where you don't have to go get another supplement. You could literally make it this simple if you want to, right?
100%. And it's not anything to say about don't buy teas because they're in the grocery store. Buy the
Yeah.
tea. You know,
Yeah.
there's an optimal way to there's like the highest level you can do it, but
Yeah.
there's still a lot of benefits. And there's a place that I buy tea in bulk.
Uh-huh.
The stuff that I don't make myself, I don't have any affiliation with them. I've been buying from them for 20 years. They're called Star West Botanicals. It's an
Okay.
online herb store, and you can buy tea in bulk, tea bags. And they're
Oh,
organic, they're fresh, they are amazing. And that would be a place that I would turn people like I buy it by the pound and I share it with my sisters and some people on my street. But
yeah.
1 pound bag will come with like 250 tea bags.
Oh, wow. Like they actually
So
ship you the tea bags with the bulk tea?
they ship it in the tea bags. They're already made into
Oh,
little
they
tea
do.
bags. And they're so fresh. It's my favorite place to buy tea. I've been buying from there 20 years.
Okay. Oh,
And
wow.
if they have this is where I get my pot of Arco tea, because I
Okay.
don't have a pot of Arco tree.
No, right, right,
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
they have all kinds of tea. That's where I get my yerba mate, because it's the same.
Yeah.
I don't have a yerba mate tree.
Yeah, yeah, that's so interesting. As we're talking about yerba mate, I'd like to get your thought on this too, Jane, because I've read, and I personally don't get too worried about this, but I've read that like what is it? Too much of the roasted has been shown in research to create like oxidative stress in the body and like lead to increased risk of, I swear I read this someplace, like cancer. But do you have any like thoughts about that, or like have you found that to be true with like the way you process that tea and drink it?
Yeah, yeah, and I actually have a very good friend who's from Brazil, where yerba mate grows, and her and her little 2-year-old son, they have those really cool little yerba mate mugs.
Yeah,
They
like the
pass them
gourds,
on.
right?
Yeah, some are gourds and some are just these really ornate, and they actually do the I think the green leaves are the best. I think if the dried and green leaves, I think roasted, I've never heard that they're cancer causing.
Or maybe it's too high temperature. You brew it in too high temperature water. I don't know why this is sticking out for me, but that was
Yeah.
something that kinda stuck with me. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I've heard I mean I think if there's a different taste to it, if you
yeah,
roast yerba mate leaves,
okay.
there's a different taste when you roast things. It's like when
Very
you
true.
throw a steak on the grill and you char it up, it tastes different.
Yes,
It's not gonna
yes.
be the best for you,
Right.
as far as the char part, but so I think I would just my intuition with it, even though I have studied it a little bit,
Yeah,
I prefer the leaves without them being roasted. Um,
yeah,
Partly because intuitively and just knowing without the roast, it's more healthy for you. So
yeah. That makes sense to me, and when
yeah.
I've drank it too, I preferred that flavor of just the raw yerba
Yeah, and
mate.
it's just so mild and so smooth. I mean, I have a cup every morning of yerba mate. Yeah,
Yeah,
love it.
nice. Yeah, and what's kinda funny about this is, like, both the Pau d'Arco, because that's the other one you said you drink daily, right? And
Yeah,
yerba mate both have antifungal properties, so when I'm dealing with people that do, say, like, functional
yeah.
stool testing, they have high candida come out, I'm like, "Hey, here's some teas, like, you could switch your coffee for yerba mate, still get the caffeine, but now you've got the antifungal benefits, which is awesome too, right?"
Yeah, Pata Arco is really well known for its anti-candida, antifungal properties. And
Yeah.
sometimes I mean I love the taste of Pata Arco tea, but my diet isn't perfect, and some I can kind of tell if I might have if I'm eating a little bit too much sugar, I can
Yeah.
kind of go, okay, I'm really glad I'm doing the Pata Arco every day. And it's kind of a reminder too, like, mm,
Yeah.
you don't want to just cover up a bad diet with some supplements or herbs or whatever.
Exactly,
Uh,
exactly. But I really love that you kind of told the story about having people come in that are on like 50 to 80 things. This is like
Oh,
kind
it's
of a
crazy.
yeah, like a perfect picture of just what's happening in the whole do it yourself. And I'm not saying sometimes this can happen because a lot of practitioners out there are very supplement happy, for lack of a better word, right? Like they'll happily throw 25 things at people. And that I think is just getting to the place of like, first of all, like, how can you take all that and still be hungry for a meal? I don't understand that, but like,
Well, and I here's what I think. I think what happens from my experience of people that are taking so many supplements is that they hear, like, say someone who's taking something for cancer. And this
yeah,
is probably my most, this is where people really are on the most, is that they'll, they might have had the medical community say there's nothing else we can do for you. And then they
yeah,
start going, okay, well, they start looking for natural. So
yeah,
then they'll hear about something and they'll go, oh, I need to add that. And then they'll hear about something else, or a friend will send them something. And then they'll just start, they're afraid to not add everything that they hear that's anti-cancer. And they
yeah,
don't need to do that. But I think the same thing happens with people who struggle with Lyme disease or
yeah,
any type of uh, ailment that we deal with. We, especially if you go down that rabbit hole of alternative
yeah.
natural health remedies and herbal remedies, you go down that rabbit hole, all of a sudden the whole buffet opens to you.
It's
And then
true.
you become afraid not to, what happens if I don't add this? I heard from my friend that this is going to be the thing that's going to change the game. It's like, no, 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 no. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be that hard. You
Mhm.
might only need a small handful. In fact, my most interesting thing is, and I don't know if this is a good segue into this, it feels so interesting right now, but
Yeah.
I'll have someone that might, be referred to me from a sister who says, hey, can you help my friend? She's got this issue. And
Yeah.
then they'll tell me what they're dealing with, and I'll say, they want me to give them some herbs. And I'll say,
Mhm.
you know what, really, what you need is you need to, there's some, like, what's going on in your life? Like,
Yeah.
what's going on with your marriage, or what's going on with your job, or what, like, I can tell that there's a chronic issue that they're having, but
Yeah.
no amount of herbs will cover it up, or will even have, like, especially chronic pain that's not
Yeah.
caused by an injury. And I'm not talking about a serious health issue that's causing you chronic pain.
Right.
So you might need to have, you know, some emotional trauma cleared because
Yeah.
no amount of herbs are going to cover that up. So,
Yeah. No, for sure. And I love how you keep kind of like circling back to that, and it makes me think I was going to ask you just from your training, because I'm guessing your dad was a big influence for you, right? Like did you
yeah,
learn a lot of your stuff from your dad just kind of growing up and seeing his
yeah,
work? I'm so curious because you mentioned he had a real love for like Native American herbal remedies, and I know that in a lot of those Native American cultures within the shaman, right? There's ways of unearthing and dealing with some of these like traumas. And so I was going to ask you about kind of his experience and then your experience and just trying to how do you integrate that, right? Like did you take a lot of wisdom from looking at kind of those cultures and how they work with that?
Do you find yourself getting up super early on work days in order to get done with multiple runs to the bathroom? Or waiting and waiting to finally have a bowel movement? Has living your life around unpredictable bowel movements and other chronic gut symptoms left you feeling trapped, stressed, and dealing with anxiety? There are often hidden factors and stressors driving these symptoms, factors that your doctor isn't trained to help you find. Getting to the bottom of these factors, along with the right nutritional approach, is the key to resolving your symptoms. Interested in learning more? Click the link to grab my free e-guide.
yeah. This is where I have actually never had anyone ask me that question. It is so perfect. So my dad was a scientist.
Okay.
He was educated through the college system, and his love of plant medicine and botany and taxonomy and biology, and this is where he was a book learner, and then this was all passed on to us, like, he'd help us identify plants, like, on the side of the road. If he saw something that was blooming and it's like he wanted to teach us, we'd all pile out and he'd be like, okay, this is this plant and this is the botanical name and the Latin name and the common name. And you use the flowers and the stems and the leaves and you prep it into this. And this was just normal. And it never felt like he was just lecturing us. Like we never felt like he sat us down and but this was just rolled off of him when he saw things. And when, when we were eating dinner, all of us were sitting around, we had every meal together, which was beautiful. And it was like, he'd give us a little thing about piperine and black pepper. And, but my dad was like the logistical, what makes plants medicinal for humans? And how does this plant complement the properties of this plant? So his emotional, spiritual, all that was not there. That and I don't mean that in like a bad way. I mean it in a way that my dad was just the scientist and he wanted to know what made the constituents of plants work and how they worked in the human body. And he geeked out on all the Latin names and he geeked out on all of that stuff. And now, he's been gone a long time. He's been gone 27 years. And I've had a big journey. I never realized I'd be the one carrying on my dad's work. I'm so grateful that I am. And all my siblings are so grateful that I am because I provide all these formulas for them too. And I've had this whole, I've always been this really kind of sensitive person, empathic person. I've always been into like astrology and the muscle testing and the emotions. And I've always been into that. And I've loved cultures that have these deep wisdom with the shamans and all of that. So to me, it's this perfect blend of what my dad taught me, what he brought to the table. Like I would give anything to sit down and have a conversation with him right now. Cause it'd be like, okay, Dad, you had all this. And what do you think about this? What do you think about the emotional root cause of this? And I think it would be really fascinating because the world is very different than when he was alive. There was no internet. You think about that. So crazy, right?
It is very crazy. And I think this kind of gets back to kind of how our brains are wired. And, some people that just is like that, they love that, right? It's just like, how can I kind of break it down and understand the properties? And I mean, there's goodness in that for sure. And you certainly can approach herbs that way. But I can kind of resonate also with what you're saying in that, like, one of the things that drew me to Chinese medicine originally, especially the herbal side of it, because there was a minute way back in the day, I contemplated going to school to become an acupuncturist. I didn't do it after all, but like the herbal stuff just interested me more because when I met a mentor who was trained by his mentor, who was classically Chinese trained, and they have this whole way of describing like the energetic properties and all the way down to like how you can do this pulse and tongue diagnosis to really, it's not just this pure physical art. It's like you're literally trying to feel into like, is there like a depressive quality to this person? Is there like a stuckness? Is there like a, are they presenting with like, excitability and heat, right? And like all of that was like baked into the whole like verbiage and way of like understanding the herbs. And so it was almost impossible to separate out like, I mean, I'm sure you could with Chinese herbs just dial it down. Like, for example, you could take like the bitter herbs, right? And be like, well, these help support bile, like coming from the liver and helping to break down food. But like, there's like this like sour quality, which is like dispersing in Chinese medicine, right? So it's very interesting because it's like, who are those people that might be kind of contracted and stuck that might need that dispersion energy to help open them up and move stuff? And so I just found that so fascinating because, like, for me too, being a more empathic, I guess, interested in the emotional side of things, like, I was like, oh, yeah, this is so great. I love this. Right. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, you can actually heal yourself with your belief systems alone.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So I believe from what I have been watching humanity do the last few decades and the last 5 years especially, I think we're realizing that we are energetic spiritual beings and we're having a physical experience. We're not a
Yeah.
physical being. We're not, our physical avatar it's not who we are. We are
Right.
having an experience as if like our consciousness, which there is a massive rise in consciousness right now, And I'm so grateful because we're beginning to remember who we are. But
Mhm.
we cannot have an experience on this beautiful planet without this physical body. And
Yeah.
if we've decided that our body is broken, and that sounds weird because who would decide, who would want our, we don't like physical pain, but we let these diseases and everything, we let it define who we are. And there's some people who can't imagine their
Mhm.
life without the physical because it defines them. People treat
Right.
them differently, or they don't have, they don't have to be present. And I'm not saying people want these things. It might be something that's buried deep that they don't
Yeah.
realize. But
Right.
I have like there's a very quick story I'll tell you here. So a couple years after I first restarted my dad's company, so a long time ago, I got this call from this man who was calling to get some check about our herbal protocol for his 30-year-old daughter who her breast cancer had come back. So
Oh, wow.
and they had exhausted everything. They basically told her, there's nothing else we can do for you. And
Yeah.
so he had found me. So he told me this story. He said when she was 9 years old, her mother died of breast cancer. And
Oh,
when she went to the funeral, and none of the adults realized what they were saying, but she heard them say, all of the women in our life, in our family died from breast cancer because not only did her mother die, but her mother's sister, her mother's mom, and her mother's mother.
oh,
So there
wow.
were all these women in the family that had died from the exact same type of breast cancer. So here's this 9-year-old girl at her
Yeah.
mother's funeral, and she's hearing this. Now the adults don't mean they're simply all the stuff. So he
Yeah.
said from the moment he took her home from her mom's funeral, her mantra became, I'm gonna die from breast cancer because all the women in my family died from breast cancer. And when she was 18, she developed breast cancer.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I know. And then she went, so he's telling me this, and I was just covered in chills because so he said she went through all the stuff. She went
Yeah.
through a double mastectomy, she did radiation, she did chemo, and she went into remission in her mid-20s.
Yeah.
And her mantra never changed. She still wasn't convinced that she was healed. She was
Yeah.
still convinced she was going to die from breast cancer. So it
Yeah.
came back when she was 30.
Yeah.
And he did what he could for her, and about 6 months after that phone call she passed. And
Oh,
I always
geez.
say this story because I don't think we realize the power of what we believe. Our biology responds to our belief systems. If we believe we're
Yeah.
broken, if we believe our ill health is a physical issue only,
Yeah.
then our our consciousness wants to make us happy. It goes, oh, that's what you believe. Well, okay, here you go. And
Yeah.
that sounds rough. I know that sounds rough for people, but it's something to contemplate.
Well, for sure. Are you familiar with Joe Dispenza's work, Dr. Joe
Of
Dispenza?
course. I
Yes,
love him.
that's the exact paradigm that he subscribes to.
Of
And you're
course.
making me think about what's so fascinating with what he's demonstrating in all the workshops he runs worldwide is that people can heal themselves that exact same way
Of
too.
course. Of
Not that
course.
it's easy, right? But like I think he's one of the best describers of like the literal like science behind how that works when he's talking
Yes.
about like the quantum field and
Right. Right.
how, the source energy, call it God, call it what you want, right? Like
Yeah.
it's really going to we in order for us to co-create with it, we have to create from within us this new
Yes.
reality, and whatever we're focusing our energy and attention on, it's going to like double that, right? So if we're focusing on
Yes.
whether it's consciously or subconsciously this unintentionally bad outcome, like I'm gonna get cancer, right? Like that is what it's always gonna support. So it's kind of like neutral in that sense, right? Like it'll go whatever
Right.
way you decide to channel your energy and attention. But the amazing thing is like imagine if you decided to channel your energy and attention towards creating a reality of perfect health for yourself. And not that that happens overnight, right? But like it's like all laws, right? Like the more energy and practice and discipline, like you will literally over time, like manifest that. You have to based on just the amount of
Yes.
like focus and energy that goes into that, right?
100%. It's just like
Yeah.
Bruce Lipton, the
Yes.
biology of belief. And
Yes.
here's
Yes.
a really, really simple little book people can read. It's called Dying to Be Me. Have you heard
Yeah.
of this book?
I have, yes,
Yeah, it's a
yes.
powerful story. And the thing is, spontaneous healing can occur.
It
A
can.
100%. It's
Yeah,
like we think it has to be this long, drawn out, painful journey to get to where we believe we deserve vibrant health. It does
right,
not have to be that way.
right.
And if I could go so far as suggest that even something like a beautifully facilitated psychedelic plant medicine journey might make the difference for you. And I've
Right.
experienced, 3 of those myself
Yeah.
over the years. I don't ever believe it should be done for entertainment, even though I don't judge it. I
Yeah.
believe that we sometimes we need to crack open what our
Mhm.
potential is and
Yeah.
and realize who we are and what we
Yes.
have. So
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, Jane. I actually kind of wanted to ask you about that because I've had another guest on the podcast who isn't an herbalist, but he comes from a pretty actually traumatic background, really uh kind of bad upbringing, bad part of LA raised in, right? And it kind of basically alchemized that upbringing to become this, amazing coach and really like passionate about coaching men and getting them to kind of like get in touch with their passion, turn their lives around. But part of his kind of journey of transformation eventually involved looking into plant-based medicines and he is a huge advocate for that and
yeah.
I think he even said something to the effect of like he feels using them appropriately, like one good plant-based medicine session could be equivalent to like many dozens of psychotherapy sessions like comparatively, right?
Oh, I completely agree. I think that you have to really look at the things that they demonize and they criminalize.
Mhm.
Because if you have a population that is healed and empowered and not stuck on all the things that keep us sick and controlled,
Yes.
then we're hard to control. So
Yeah.
you look at all these things that have been demonized,
Yes.
the plant medicine. This is where deep indigenous wisdom, my Native American brother, his name is Bert, and he has done a lot of work with peyote. He's because has been part of the culture, his biology, and he wasn't raised with it like we weren't, but
Yeah.
as an adult, and now, he's in his 60s, so this has been a long time.
Yeah.
And so he is the most beautiful, his essence and his consciousness, you are in his presence and you feel like you're just this like shiny soul just being in his presence. And it's
Yeah.
because there's a reason. Yes, I completely agree. I think that one plant medicine journey that's carefully facilitated, you go in with the right intentions and you
Mhm.
have someone that helps you out the other side, because you can't just have everything open up and you see, and then
Yeah.
you go back and you blow up your life because you're like, oh, I'm married to the wrong person, I'm in the wrong
Right.
job. No, like you can't do that, because you have responsibilities, and you have like we have things that we in this matrix, this simulation we live in, we
Yeah.
have responsibilities. So
Right.
yes, I think that a beautifully facilitated plant medicine journey can take 10 years of therapy away.
I totally agree. And I think one of the huge advantages is like the people that probably know deep down there's something there emotionally, energetically that's held.
Yeah.
But even with therapy and even with some of the tools, like they might even really be truly like, I really want to unearth this and figure this out. And there might still be some blocks or, it's like that shift isn't happening for them where they're like, I'm just not really getting what this is. That's
Yeah,
where I think the plant-based stuff can really help because it's like
undeniably.
gonna show you probably what it is that you're not able to see for yourself,
Yeah,
right?
and I would just say do it with care, because I think it's, from my perspective of what I'm watching happen, because it's gaining in popularity again, is
Mhm.
that now there are going to be maybe not the right people or institutions that are going to want to facilitate. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? I think people they just need to be really strategic, and they need to just really, you know, make sure that they're doing it the right way.
exactly. Like they at
Yeah.
least do some research if they're gonna say go on a retreat somewhere and just make sure
Yeah.
that's like a well reputed,
Right.
they have that infrastructure in place. I would agree
Yeah.
wholeheartedly.
You know, and for me, it was like the three that I've done, and they've been very far spaced apart. You know, this is not something I want to just go do to escape from my life and
Right.
feel the beauty of, oh, this is so great.
Right.
Um, I've never felt pulled to go do it with a group of people. It's all just been just me and just the facilitator.
Oh,
Because I
nice.
just wanted, I just that, and that's my own personal. I know there's people who will go to places like Costa Rica and they'll have a group, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
a group thing. In fact, a friend of mine is a filmmaker, and he did a series called Psychedelics Revealed. It's
Oh, sure.
really,
Yeah.
it's a
I've seen
really
that.
beautiful. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's Jeff is one of my hiking buddies.
Oh, no way, that is
Yeah,
too funny, Jan. Well, I
yeah.
know exactly who yeah, actually, a friend of mine gifted me that DVD because she's really into watching all that stuff, and I didn't watch all of it because it was a lot of footage, but it was really
Yeah,
fascinating just to kinda
yeah.
see from the inside what average people were experiencing, but I can kind of see where you're coming from in that I don't know if I too would necessarily prefer a group setting for something like that. Like now, if it was a Joe Dispenza retreat, I think being in a group could actually augment the effects of what he's
I
trying to
agree.
do.
I agree
But
with you.
with
Yeah.
the plant-based stuff, I just think especially for the first time, for me personally, it might be just a little bit like, just that in of itself might kind of lock me down a little bit to be like, I'm not sure and be go in a little bit more like nervous and scared mode than like open and like,
Yeah, yeah, and
yeah,
it's really fascinating because I was a tiny bit nervous the first time because I'm a person who doesn't like I don't drink anymore, but
yeah,
I used to drink a glass of wine, you know, here and there, but
yeah,
I never got drunk. I mean, I grew up Mormon. I don't practice anymore, but I grew up in the Mormon faith where you didn't drink at
yeah.
all. So I had my first sip of alcohol at 34,
Oh,
and
wow.
I never ever let myself like I want to be in control. Like
Yeah.
I don't want to have where I'm feeling tipsy. So I've never smoked marijuana. I'm not against marijuana, but I've never smoked a cigarette. Like
Yeah.
I don't do those things.
Yeah.
But so I know when I went into my first plant medicine journey, I was nervous.
I would be.
But then I was like, you know, okay, this is where you have to be brave. And everything was lined up, you know, very good. And then the second time I did, I was a lot more prepared because I was like, oh, I know what I'm going in for. And yeah, anyway, to me, I don't know. This is one of I'm so happy that this is starting to gain some momentum again. I'm so
Yeah.
happy.
I would agree. I would agree. And, this kind of brings up another curious question just based on your experience with it, because this is an experience I haven't actually had as of yet. Like, not at that level where you would
Yeah.
want to travel and have it facilitated, hopefully down the road sometime. But do you feel like when people are at that place of contemplating that it's better that they've already at least started some deeper somatic work in conjunction or have a plan in place once they have that experience to come back and continue to work with that stuff in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah, I do. I don't think you have to have everything perfectly in place. I think you have to have an almost an inner calling. Like there's like you almost have to kind of go, I'm being pulled to this. And it
Yeah.
makes me a little bit fearful. And maybe I don't have all the stuff in place, like the meditation and the breath work and the journaling and all the stuff that we
Yeah.
all know we should be working on these things.
Yeah.
I do think it's good to have time in nature daily if you can before you go into something like this because you become so grounded and you for me I don't like I'm very blessed. I don't have any trauma to heal. I grew up in a a beautiful family with loving parents. I was not abused. I was I'm very blessed that I have no trauma to heal. So I
Yeah.
knew also going into this I wanted to break open my consciousness
Yeah.
quicker than I
Yeah.
could do it with a Joe Dispenza meditation
Yes. Yes.
or just hours and hours and hours of sitting in nature with my journal or whatever.
Yes, exactly.
I wanted to fast track, and the times I've had these experiences have been nothing but blissful. And
Yeah.
there's been no hard stuff come up. There's been no, and I believe that there are, like you said, there's some things that people have. So yes, I do think it's a good idea to have some grounding practices in place so that when you come out of this experience, you can go and continue those. So yes, I do believe that.
Exactly. And if nothing else, I would think probably having had an experience like that, probably that deeper knowing or desire to continue to work on that is stronger too, just because you've now seen or experienced this
Yeah,
thing that you weren't capable of. So it's kind of like, why
yeah,
wouldn't I do breathing practices to everyday
yeah.
stress, move that out quicker or whatever, right? So,
Well, and I think it makes you realize that we take ourselves so seriously and we care too much about what other people think about us, and we
uh,
try to control everything and we collect too much shit. You know what I
yeah,
mean? It's
totally.
just like we start to realize that it's not about who dies with the most toys wins. It's not about how much stuff can we gather. And you really, for me, you come out of it with a desire to simplify and realize, oh my gosh, I'm gonna enjoy this experience that I signed up for. And I don't want to be caught in all the things that my physical body is, I'm going to do my best to hurry up out of these diseases I might be expressing. Let's be done
Exactly.
with this, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's just it. It's kind of like I don't know. I just remember like listening to a Joe Dispenza lecture, and he was talking about this friend of his in New York who had literally lost all his money in one day. And then they're sitting there having lunch the very next day. It's like, well, how's it going? He's like, oh yeah, I lost all my money, but that's okay. I'm gonna earn it all back. Like no big deal. Like we're just talking about the weather. And can you imagine walking around in the world with that type of attitude? It's like, I think that's the biggest challenge as a human being is if you're able to spiritually evolve, right? Like you spoke earlier about just that dichotomy of spirit or energy, we could call it, and mass of the body. And we have to kind of have the two cohabitate. And, from an ascension standpoint, right, as we think about all of these amazing people in history who have been able to like self actualize and go up that
Yeah.
scale, it's fascinating to me because there's this like to go between the two to live in this like state of being where nothing really matters and you're just in the here and now and it's like all these concerns people have all the time, no big deal, like I see it all, right? But then be present in the human reality which is riddled with problems and struggle and material things, like it's almost inconceivable to like to any brain, right?
Well, and we need to realize that we need to go with the flow. We need to be more present, and we need to realize that all things will work out exactly how they're supposed to. We can
Yes.
stress about something and
Yes.
it's going to still be what it is, whether or not we stress about it. We can
Yeah.
choose, oh, here's this guy loses all his money. I can stress and ruin my life and my health. Or I can be like, man, okay, it happened. What
Yeah.
happened? Like I've lost both my parents. My mom passed 10 years ago. It was difficult, but
Yeah.
but it's part of life, and I can choose to be completely, you know, in a horrible place for as
Yeah.
long as I want to be, or I
Yeah.
can say, I can give so much gratitude and grace for the life my mom gave me, for the life my mom lived, and or I can let it define me in a negative way. So yeah, I think that the world is shifting on a consciousness level.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful time to be here. I know I said that already, but it's so true.
Yeah, I love it. I love it, Jane. Yeah, I mean, this is probably a really good place to start to wrap, and I feel like these people,
Yeah, I
like
agree.
having these conversations, it's gonna vibe with the people who I think are getting there too, what they're thinking about things. Like,
I
I
agree.
wouldn't go so far to say it's the majority of the people out there, but that minority that are starting to open up and like really say, look, like this life we've been living, it doesn't work, right? Like they're craving this different way of being and looking for how do I overcome my struggles, my traumas holding me back? How do I empower myself to take my health back? Right. Like that group of people is growing by the day, right? And I think sooner
Yeah.
or later there's going to be a crack in our current health paradigm where people are just going to start opting out of the
Yep.
norm because the norm is not working for the majority anymore,
And it's
right?
already happening in a lot more than you know. Maybe you know. It's already happening on such a mass scale. It's
Yeah.
almost like the people who are, I have connections to a lot of people like naturopaths and people who do energy work. And just because of what I do, I have all these connections, and
Yeah.
they have never been busier because it's like people are starting to go, wait a minute. The crack is already there. The crack is there really big. And it's beautiful.
It is. I love it. I love it. Well, is there anything you want to share before we wrap up in terms of just pieces of information or how people can reach you or any resources you have to offer the listening audience?
I think if I have a little YouTube channel, it's Barlow Herbal. I put out a Sunday message of love every single Sunday.
Nice.
And then I share an herbal wisdom video during the week, so you can tune in there.
Nice.
I did update my dad. My dad wrote a book on herbal medicine when I was in high school, when I was a senior.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I updated it, and it got I doubled the content. I added a chapter of psychedelic herbs to
Oh,
it.
sweet.
Yeah, it's the name of it is Be Your Own Shaman.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and you can get that on Amazon or Barnes and Noble,
Yeah.
because it got picked up by a publisher, which is so cool.
That is so cool. And is it
I
kind of
know.
like meant for people who are contemplating even doing something like that? It would be worth just picking that up to kind of have that background and know what your
Yeah.
options are a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, well, to me, this is like there's a lot of spices in there and herbs, and like people might not realize the power of some of the even stuff we talked about, like the cayenne and the
Yeah.
rosemary and all that stuff, and then how to make it. Like I wanted to empower people in how you can start making these things yourself, and taking all the deep science,
Mhm.
um, not just out of it, but also like here's some easy information,
Yeah.
but yeah. So yeah, I'm easy to find, but
Yeah. I love that. Be your own shaman. That's such a great title for a book.
Did you find this episode informative and helpful? I'd love to have you leave me a 5-star rating. Do you have questions about holistic approaches to optimizing gut health that you'd like to ask? Please leave your question or comment below, and I will be sure to address it personally or cover it in a future episode. Be sure to check the show notes for any resources mentioned in today's episode. See you next time.